Okay, we have a lot to talk about.
We do, yeah.
So why don't we just start the show?
What do you want to do for the cold open? You want to just like have us talk about Last Jedi for a minute or two and then do the intro?
We just did the cold open, didn't we? This is our cold open.
Yeah, so we have a lot to talk about, obviously. The Last Jedi being one of them.
What an interesting topic. This is going to go on for like a full hour, Star Wars, right?
It very well could. I mean, I think we'll want to touch on maybe 2017 top movies, possibly, if we can fit it in. But let's start the show.
Please listen carefully.
Welcome to the final episode of the Extra Buttery podcast for 2017. This time on the show, we're going to be diving in on the movie that seems to be dominating the movie industry discussion right now, Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Jason and I have both seen it. We have some differing opinions on certain bits of it, so we'll be getting into that first up on the show. But coming to you from Toronto, my name is Robert Snow, and joining me from Vancouver is my co-host Jason Chen. How's it going?
Good.
So this Last Jedi stuff, I feel like the whole weekend on Twitter has been dominated by people fighting with each other about this Star Wars movie, if it represents a return to form, or if it's a total betrayal of fans' hopes and dreams. It's gotten a little bit toxic, if you ask me.
Which is kind of surprising to me. But before we get into that, there's one bone I have to pick with you, Robert Snow.
Okay, what is that, Jason Chen?
So on the website, if you guys haven't noticed, Rob's review of The Last Jedi is up. And there's a part where you write, quote, "The prequels were a crusade by Lucas to over-explain parts of the story that he, and only he, felt needed to be filled in."
Yes.
I completely disagree because I was very interested in that part of the story. I don't think Star Wars is as compelling if you don't see Anakin turn into Vader.
Well,
so I appreciated that part. But as a whole, the three prequels weren't very good. But the Anakin to Vader story was awesome. And a lot of people have episode 3 ranked in like the upper half of all the Star Wars movies. And I think that's probably the main reason why.
Yeah, I definitely agree that that the story needed to be told, you know, to get the complete arc of Anakin Skywalker. But what I was like driving at with that bit of the review was just to say that, you know, Lucas decided that he had to get into the like boring political backstory of how, you know, it wasn't just let's have a great actor and some great dialogue to explain how Anakin came to be Darth Vader. It was that plus all of the stuff to do with Naboo trade routes, and, you know, obviously if you've seen the prequels, you know where I'm driving at. And it's just like he put so much importance on that at the same time as the Anakin arc that that's sort of what I was striving towards there.
Okay. Because I was like, I take exception to that because I was very interested in Anakin's story. But I totally agree with you that, like, it's funny episode 1 started with, like, a trade blockade.
Yes. Yeah.
And you're just like, what? This isn't Star Wars. Trade blockades. Politics. What? Speaking of politics, I have noticed that a lot more critics like The Last Jedi more than the audience.
Yes, and that's been a bit of a bone of contention for sure.
Right, and I'm more on the critics side for this one. I really like The Last Jedi, actually. But I don't really understand why audiences hate it so much. Like, it feels like all the nitpicks they have are plot points. But I feel like plot points is one of The Last Jedi's strengths.
Yeah.
Am I, like, totally misreading this movie, or is, like, our audience is much dumber than I think?
Well, no, I think it's a little bit more fine-grained than that, because obviously we're seeing a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, but then this 57% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. And
right. Yeah. And even on Reddit, because I noticed that, like, even leading up to the movie's release, or like the day of the release, but before I had seen the movie, I had already noticed that it was pretty toxic, which I thought was really interesting. Anyway, what's your take on it?
I think what we're seeing too is a bit of a very, very vocal minority of people who are seeing the movie. If the true audience reception of The Last Jedi was as negative as has been represented by the people yelling about it on Twitter or in the comments on Reddit or, you know, all the other platforms, if it was really that negative, I think maybe the critics would also have picked up on it in a way. Like it's very odd for the critics who, you know, they still try to look at movies the way fans look at movies. There's no gigantic gap between the two, I don't think. But I think what we're seeing is a bit of a it seems like the demographic of the fans who hate The Last Jedi is a little bit homogeneous in the sense that we're getting a lot of angry sounding, maybe youngish wannabe critics who are the ones who are yelling about it the most. Not to seem elitist, but it does seem that way. Like you read the stuff, the actual content of their critiques, and it tends to be like you were saying, very focused on plot points. They're not doing any kind of deeper analysis of symbolism or character motivations or anything. They'll drop those kind of keywords in there, but they're not really talking about it. They're mostly just complaining about plot points that they feel don't match their preconceived notion of what Star Wars is.
Right. That's the main thing. Like, I agree with some of the audience criticisms about like certain things that don't seem to be what I expected, and certain things I felt were a little misplaced. But I don't understand why that should be like the be-all end-all of a movie. I think it was very well shot. I thought it was pretty exciting. I thought it was visually fantastic.
Yep.
I mean, are we at the point where films have to follow audience expectations for it to be considered good?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think like for example, without getting too far into spoilers, maybe we'll push the spoiler talk a little bit later in the discussion. But one thing that people have been picking up on a lot is the side quest where Finn and Rose go to this other planet. And
I have to agree with the audience on this one, actually. But we'll get to that later.
Exactly, yeah. But without getting into like the specifics of why they go to this planet or what they do there, a lot of people are saying that the overall thrust of that side mission is pointless. But I have to disagree, because the theme of the movie, in my view, is the failures of the characters. We've come to see certain characters as heroes, and by Finn and Rose going to this other planet, trying to accomplish a mission, and then actually failing in a rather spectacular way and actually making the plight of their cause a whole lot worse by bringing a character into the mix who actually endangers them even more. That's a commentary on how they kind of pushed forward with this idea without kind of thinking it through, and they actually fail. We see them fail, but then later on they're redeemed because they try another plan, and they're actually able to avert disaster in that case. So it's all about that kind of lesson that's passed on in a very important scene. Like, failure is the best teacher, and that's how I took it. But it seems like a lot of people are just objecting to the fact that on the surface, or from a plot perspective, nothing is accomplished in that mission. But I kind of think that's the point.
Okay, it's hard for me to go in it without spoiling anything, so I'll try my best, but no guarantees. But I agree that I think the one thing about your point about failure and how things may not go according to plan, I think that has already been well established. I felt that because we've seen Anakin turn bad, we've seen the Empire rule much of the galaxy for a lot of years, I think the stakes were already high. You know, like movies that give certain characters plot armor kind of don't feel like they have the same stakes because of plot armor, basically.
Yeah, for sure. Like you can reasonably expect the hero to survive whatever encounter they're in, and there's much less drama as a result.
But at the same time, I do feel like plot-wise and character-wise, even though I understood what Rian Johnson is going for and what your logic is, I don't feel like it was particularly well executed. I don't feel the characters grew any more than before. I don't think the chemistry was there. I think the planet itself was rather boring. The misdirection with what's the guy they were...
The Benicio del Toro character?
Not him, but the guy they were supposed to go after.
Oh, the one played by Justin Theroux.
Yes. Okay, Justin Theroux. Yes. Okay, so I don't feel like those two characters were very interesting. I felt they were a little ushered in, but maybe they'll have a bigger role in the third film. I don't know, especially Benicio del Toro. And other than the Kylo Ren, Rey, Luke storyline, I didn't care much for it. The stakes were, and plot-wise, to me, weren't the same.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I sort of see where you're driving at, but I would strongly hesitate from calling the entire like portion of the film pointless, though, because that's some people were like,
I think pointless is a little ruthless.
Yeah.
Like it's a little.
I think it is.
Too much.
I think it was coming from people who were kind of fixating on the plot aspect of it, and they weren't really looking that much deeper. They weren't considering it in the context of the broader themes of the movie, and
right, thematically, I understood what he was going for sure.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I didn't care for either of the characters, and they didn't develop much for me. That's all. I wish there was a bigger point to that excursion, but we'll get to more of that later when we can start naming names and stuff.
Well, maybe before we get to that point, then we can just speak a little bit more like broadly about the overall take, because
I have a question for you though.
Okay.
I like this one a lot more than The Force Awakens, because my main criticism of The Force Awakens was that it was too derivative of New Hope.
Sure.
It was kind of like a remake. I love The Last Jedi for the plot points because they really blew it wide open. I really honestly felt like for the first time in a long time, I saw a Star Wars film where certain plot points really excited and surprised me. I do have my criticisms of The Last Jedi, but before that reason alone, because it was original and it really explored the Star Wars universe a whole lot more, I liked it more than The Force Awakens. But between The Force Awakens and Last Jedi, which one do you prefer and why?
I think I'm on your side on this one. Like, I mean,
Really? I thought you would like The Force Awakens a bit more.
No. I mean, like, there are certainly parts of The Force Awakens that you would probably describe as derivative that I liked a lot more, because
Yes.
because like, you know, maybe when a director does something like that, I don't hold it quite as much against them. Like I kind of enjoy the nostalgia side of it, or the callback a little bit more.
There are quite a few callbacks in The Last Jedi though.
True, yeah, but I think like stuff like, I don't know, I loved some of Abrams' like really expressive visuals. Like in The Force Awakens, we see TIE fighter battles and Millennium Falcon aerial maneuvers and stuff that they just weren't able to do in previous movies, or they couldn't conceive of doing. And there's just so much more expressive action scenes in that, which I think is like a one of Abrams' strengths. So
like Kylo Ren stopping a laser mid-flight.
So that, or like, you know, just some of the acrobatics that you see the Millennium Falcon pulling off, you know, and especially set against the backdrop of the crashed Star Destroyer on the planet Jakku, or when the X-Wings come in to save everyone on Maz Kanata's planet and you just get swept up. You like the camera tilts up and you get the perspective of the people on the ground in that battlefield looking up and watching the X-Wings come in. And that was a perspective that, you know, maybe it's a little bit specific, but it was a perspective that I don't think we'd ever had of that classic Star Wars vehicle. And it felt like maybe it was a bit derivative in the sense that they were coming in to blow something up, or, you know, something like that. But it did feel like they were modifying a few things, and they were reinterpreting certain things. And I really got drawn into that.
I was about to say, like, I think it's become tradition now for every single Star Wars film to have a Millennium Falcon chase scene where they like just happen to go through a ravine and all these like TIE fighters that try to follow them just end up blowing up because they start hitting like
little protrusions and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I still like that though, but
I was disappointed. Oh, can we go into spoilers now? Like, I can't hold it in anymore.
Just one more thing though. But to more specifically answer your question though, I think I enjoyed The Force Awakens a lot more for exactly the reason you said. The fact that it does leave us in a place where we honestly can't predict where the next one is going to go.
You mean The Last Jedi?
Yeah. So that's why I liked ultimately as a film, as a completed piece of cinema. Mm-hmm. I liked it a lot more because of the opportunities it presents. Like the Force Awakens was a great experience, fun in and of itself, mm-hmm. and a great extension from what we'd already seen. But it was still a bit of a reset button because it showed us that Star Wars could still be fun, that it could still be like the original trilogy, that it wasn't stuck in whatever the prequels were, but it was a jumping off point. And this is like the best The Last Jedi is like the best logical kind of, we've put aside the themes or the things that were important from the original trilogy and we're totally open up. And yeah, for that reason, it's definitely a superior film.
Yeah, to your point, I think to me anyway, Force Awakens feels like a much tighter, complete sort of film. Like it stands on its own quite well. And The Last Jedi isn't as tight plot-wise and it's in terms of its pacing, but I like the direction that it's headed.
You know, there are multiple points, you know, and we'll get into this in a second when we finally jump into the spoilers, but there are multiple points in The Last Jedi when you're thinking to yourself, you're like, okay, that just happened. What does that mean? And it's a challenge. Like all of a sudden it's challenging you to think beyond the usual kind of good versus evil equation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, can we go into spoilers now?
Okay, so
okay. On that note, though, Rian Johnson pushed a lot of like boundaries when it came to like Star Wars lore and whatnot.
Yeah,
and when you push those boundaries, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. And I think there was a bit of a mixed bag this time. But the ones he did push very far, I think were really interesting. Yes,
exactly. So for anyone listening, if you go any further, it's going to be spoilers galore. So watch out.
Yes.
So how do you want to go about this? What is the thing that's like you're burning to get out?
It kind of off like the first sequence of the film.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's some sort of like technological explanation for this, but how the hell does a ship drop bombs in space?
That is an excellent question. I mean,
my buddy whispered that to me during the video. I was like, wow, you just totally ruined that scene for me, but good point.
Do you know how far up in the atmosphere they are?
Well, assuming it's space, I mean, unless there's like a magnetic force or a homing device or like some sort of push, like you can't just drop bombs on. You can like shoot bombs maybe, but you can't like drop bombs. That means something entirely, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, like, I'm sure somebody at Lucasfilm, you give them enough time, they'll probably come up with a very in-universe explanation. So yeah, like magnets, or maybe the dreadnought is so huge that it exerts its own gravity or something. But
yeah, something.
I'm
like
sure
that.
You can explain
anyway,
that away.
I just thought that was like, yeah, I just thought that was really funny. Let's start with the good stuff first. Okay. I think visually, I think this is the best looking Star Wars film ever.
It's up there, yeah. I mean,
like, I thought the cinematography, there are certain shots that are kind of like hero shots, but they're very well done.
Shots of particular characters or just like in general?
Yeah, like shots of particular characters, like where they're like ready for battle or like doing something really great. Or like the scene where Kylo and Luke are fighting on that salt planet and they have that wide shot of them at either end and when they're about to like engage in a duo. I thought that was like a very nice painting.
Yeah, and I liked how, you know, Rian Johnson, sort of to my point from earlier, like Abrams is more of a big vistas kind of guy. Like he loves to go wide, but there was a lot more up close kind of portrait style shots in this one, you know, like big close-ups of Rey's face or Luke's face, and you can really get into their eyes and you're like, yeah, what are you thinking about here?
Because I think you get a lot more intimate with some of the characters this time.
Yeah, because it really is like it's a story that's about what's going on in these people's heads, not necessarily like them bashing each other with starships or lightsabers, even though that does happen.
The one thing I kind of thought was interesting too was that, you know how Empire ends off on a cliffhanger? Like Luke loses his hand and Han gets frozen, blah, blah, blah. On this one, there's no real cliffhanger other than the fact that like the rebels are obviously getting ready to rebel again.
It's open-ended in the way that we know that Kylo has now declared himself the new supreme leader. Rey is planning to go off and kind of rebuild an order, a Jedi. Is it going to be a Jedi order? Is it going to be like not quite so black and white? Who knows? But yeah, it's definitely open to a sequel. You know, it's not closed off in any way. But yeah, you're right. It's not like a, oh my God, what happens now kind of thing.
That's why I think we talk about The Last Jedi blowing everything open, is because they don't write themselves into a corner for the third film.
Right.
The one thing I also wanted to touch on was the two visuals that also really caught my eye was Admiral Hodo Lightspeed thing. That was awesome, eh?
Oh yeah, I love that moment. In my screening, people were cheering and clapping when that happened.
Oh, the silence. I saw in the theater that was like kind of half full because I went to the last showing.
Yeah.
And when the silence hit, it was awesome because the theater was dead quiet. Everyone was just like in awe.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. Like the moment hits and you're basking at it, and everyone was quiet at that point. But when it kind of sunk in, the treatment of it, like the fact that he had used silence and he cut multiple times in kind of quick succession to kind of show like how insane this thing was that she pulled off, then the audience was like, oh my God, I can't believe she did that. And then the cheering and the whooping started. And I was like, yeah, okay, that I mean, it just, I think somebody was writing about it on one of the Gizmodo sites a day or two ago, and they were like, man, that thing fucking ruled. And I was like, yeah, it really did. Like, it was a really gigantic moment.
The second one is Rey's training sequence was very well done, with her doing that mirror thing and the snapping of the fingers where she goes into that cave, right?
Yeah, and that was another example of like
that rite of passage for all like Jedis to go into like a cave
of some sort. And like I half expected her to have a showdown of some sort with like an evil Force ghost, kind of like we see in Empire. The fact that like Rian Johnson decided to do that as kind of like just being totally inside her head and seeing the multiple kind of reflections of her, I thought that was a really great treatment, because it's you know, it bucked the trend of what we would expect from that type of scene, but also kind of linked back to where she was at as a character. Like she didn't really know who she was or what her origin was or anything like that. So it was a great example of the visuals really backing up the emotion of the story.
Strangely enough, Rey sees a reflection of herself, right? And so does Luke in Empire Strikes Back. I thought that was very interesting, that parallel there.
Yeah, so it's like simultaneously bucking the trend, but also kind of sticking with what we know.
Right, exactly. And the one thing I kind of want to talk about too is how Rian Johnson expanded on the powers of the Force and what is physically capable of it. So
exactly.
My one real, like, worse than that casino excursion with Finn and Rose, I did not like that Leia float through the spacey thingy.
Yeah, I mean,
it really didn't work for me. It really didn't. I think the Hodo subplot may have been even stronger if Leia had actually died. I thought Luke would die in this one, and that actually happened. But I also thought Leia would die at some point. And I figured maybe that when she got sucked into space, that was the point.
Yes, I sort of thought that was what was happening then too.
But anyway, I don't know. I didn't really like that scene very much. I think it was first of all, too hokey. And second of all, like at that point, where do you draw like the boundaries of the Force? Like if you can survive in space using the Force, I think it becomes almost too convenient of a power. Kind of like how Superman is like impervious to like everything and can do anything.
Right. I'm sort of torn on it, because one part of me agrees with you that it was a little bit hokey, and that was kind of my initial reaction when it was happening as I was watching in the theater. But I also think back and I'm like, you know, if you take the whole, like, everything we've seen Jedi do over the course of the series all together, I mean, her being able to use the Force to, I guess, you know, keep the air in her lungs and propel her back into the ship. I mean, that's no more or less ridiculous than a wizened old crone shooting lightning from his fingers. You know, but
Force lightning has always been a thing. You saw it with Snoke too.
But I feel like, you know, I think that Leia is kind of entitled to have her own big display of Force power at some point before they have to kill off her character or write her out or whatever. I mean, I do agree that like maybe they could have given her one that was a little bit less over the top, but
I think her dying and potentially becoming a Force ghost is like pretty good.
I don't know. I mean, would she become a Force ghost? I mean, that's a bit of a tangent, but
no. But I mean, she's obviously Force sensitive. But I figure that could be like manifestation of her powers, even though she's never actually been trained as a Jedi.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely wasn't my favorite scene, and I would have been totally fine if they had officially killed her off at that point.
Yeah, and of course she comes back at like the perfect moment, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, so Disney.
The thing that made me laugh though is that Admiral Akbar was killed off in that scene, and
yes,
but that was one of the sore spots that a lot of the fanboys were moaning about. They said like, "Oh, how dare you kill off such an iconic character in such a crass and cruel way?" And I'm like, guys,
Have they not seen Boba Fett and Captain Phasma? Jesus.
that or well, but let's just think about something for a sec. Like Admiral Akbar, yes, he's an iconic character in the sense that everyone remembers the one or two lines that he has in Return of the Jedi.
It's a trap.
Yeah, or like, our ships can't repel firepower of that magnitude.
Yeah.
But like, really, we don't have a connection to Admiral Akbar other than the fact that he's a fan favorite for those kind of memorable lines. Yeah, like the fact that he just gets killed in that one scene without much of a send off. That was a really, that complaint really irritated me because it showed how surface level these kind of petty critiques were.
I really like General Akbar, so don't hate. I didn't mind them killing him off like that. I just like, you know what? I don't like it when movies draw out character deaths. Like,
yeah,
just do it, get it over with. It was kind of like the Warriors 3 getting killed off pretty quickly in Thor Ragnarok.
Oh, yeah.
I agree with you. I don't think it's a legitimate criticism of the film. I was a little surprised Admiral Hodo had honestly such a small role. I thought Laura Dern would come back for the third one. I thought she would be like the main character after Leia obviously dies. Hodo would be the next leader of the rebellion.
Yeah. And and actually Admiral Holdo, was her role in the movie brought up another raft of complaints. People were whining about how they felt that she should have told Poe Dameron about her plan from the start, and it would have stopped anything from happening. But I mean, again, that is a very surface level criticism because you can't hope to.
I disagree there.
No, but you can't hope to psychoanalyze a character. We don't know everything about what she was thinking in that instance. Like, maybe she was just ticked off that Poe was undermining her and she just decided not to tell anybody, or maybe we just didn't see the scene where she told people what she was doing, but so it was to me, that was an attempt to psychoanalyze a character that we really don't have enough information to make that judgment about her.
I disagree because this is one of the worst movie tropes out there, where two characters clearly can't sit down and have a conversation, or have a huge misunderstanding about something, and sets off a series of events that honestly really doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean, certainly it can be avoided. You look at it with hindsight, but I feel like it's just as legitimate to have two characters who are so I don't know, preoccupied with their own selfish kind of insecurities that they would do something like that.
Yeah, and those are the worst characters.
But I think that's us having the benefit of hindsight. A real person in that real scenario may still do something like that, as stupid as it is.
Maybe. It's kind of like how Batman and Superman, the whole fight could have been avoided if you two just got down and had tea with your mothers,
Right. Yeah.
I think at one point, though, Hodo explains that because Poe was just demoted by Leia, she shouldn't trust him. And I think that, there's throwaway lines that I think explain why they do it. It's kind of frustrating to watch. Maybe because it pales so much in comparison to Kylo and Rey's story, because that one was by far the most compelling part of the movie. And I feel like maybe at some point during production, they sat down and said, look, we have this really great heart of the story with this Luke, Rey, and Kylo Ren relationship, but we only have an hour and a half of material.
Right.
So what are you going to do with the other hour or so? And so I think even some classic characters like Chewie, especially C-3PO, I think you could have cut out those scenes in the movie and it would have made perfect sense. I think there's almost too many directions it tries to go in, and I wish it just stayed with just maybe one or two.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of agree with that, because there were, again, I've only seen it once so far, but
yeah, me
and
too.
I made the comment in the review that some of the intercutting between scenes felt a little bit too quick for me. And maybe that was because they were juggling I think at one point it was 4 different threads. And they just felt the need to kind of keep going back and forth between them. And I'm like, oh, but I just wanted a little bit more of the Rey story, or a little bit more of the Finn story before we cut.
Right. But it also has this a bit of a Joss Whedon effect, where sometimes the jokes are just a little out of place and a little too juvenile.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he was 100% serious or not, but Mark Hamill at one point said I don't really agree with what they've done with the Luke Skywalker character. The way they've written him is not what I, in my opinion, expect him to be.
Yeah, and a lot of people made like a lot of fuss over those comments, but they didn't have the context now. So now we're trying to like go back and figure out what part of the Luke character he was talking about.
I kind of agree with Mark Hamill here, because remember there's this part where Luke tells Rey to reach out for the Force, and the only reason he has like a little leaf in his hand is so he can pull off that freaking joke.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Or the part where he drinks like that alien milk. And I'm just like, I get what you're trying to portray here, but these images don't really jive what I think of Luke would have become. Like, I always thought Luke would be a lot more serious, a lot more grumpy, and not so like kind of weird and
Yoda-like.
Yeah, a little. I do appreciate the Yoda ghost though. I really enjoy that part.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to maybe Mark Hamill will be able to talk about this in a few weeks' time once more people have seen it and like the non-disclosure agreement has expired or whatever. But I'd be curious to know like what part of it he was referencing when he made those initial comments. Like, was he talking about the jokier side of Luke, or was he talking about the more like character-driven, like the level of his loss of faith and how disillusioned he was? Like, well, maybe that was what he was talking about.
I don't disagree with the loss of faith and the disillusionment. I think that was a natural place for Luke to go. I didn't really buy the fact that Luke would have drawn a lightsaber to the point where Kylo Ren thought he was actually going to kill him.
Yeah.
Like, to me, Luke always seemed much more calm than impulsive. And for him to even entertain that thought, and as he said, like, in the heat of a moment, just grabbed his lightsaber, I find that very un-Luke-like. It's true that he was always kind of impulsive, but he becomes less impulsive at the end of Return of the Jedi when he refuses to kill his dad. Like, he becomes less impulsive. He becomes more Jedi-like, where he's like calm and everything.
That's true, but there is a little bit of like and again, some of this canon has been erased after the Lucasfilm acquisition, but there was a little bit of a grounding there for stories that followed Return of the Jedi that depicted Luke having more of a struggle with staying on the light side of the Force. And there was a story, I didn't read the novel, but they did have a moment where he actually temporarily converted to the dark side in an effort to avert a greater tragedy.
Well, isn't the Ben Solo turning to the dark side also like, it kind of came from some of the books?
Sort of, yeah, because
there was a character, I can't remember if it was a Skywalker or Solo, who actually did that.
It was a Solo, yeah. It was
a Solo? Okay.
In the old canon, Leia...
It was Jason Solo, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was Jason Solo. So there was Han and Leia had 3 children. The eldest 2 were twins, and then they had a third son, Ben. And the 2 twins were named Jaina and Jaden. And they both, like, all 3 of them became Jedi, and they were all like great pilots, and there was dozens of books and comics written about them. But at some point, the male twin falls to the dark side, becomes a Sith Lord, and it was actually the one who kills Luke Skywalker's wife, Mara Jade.
I hope in the next episode they talk more in depth about that incident between Luke and Kylo Ren and maybe the Knights of Ren. I think there's more to that story that they haven't revealed.
Yeah, totally.
Like, on the same topic with the Force powers and everything, I thought it was really interesting that Kylo and Rey had such a connection with the Force, even though, as Snoke admitted, that he helped them, like, establish that bridge. Mm-hmm. Because this, like, Force talking across planets thing, Luke and Leia kind of had a similar thing.
Yes.
And it was also interesting that they made a point of telling everyone, like Rey's parents were nobodies. Like, she's just a nobody from a desert who just happened to be, I don't know, destined or something like that, right? I'm not sure that plot point is resolved. I think there's more about Rey's parentage that still needs to be revealed. I'm kind of the mind that I still think she's a Skywalker or a Solo, but she either has Skywalker blood in him.
I mean, yeah, I would almost prefer it if it sticks with the current trajectory where it turns out that her parents are nobodies, because
okay, yeah, and that which would explain the last scene of the movie with the kid on the casino planet, right?
Yeah, I think that was a great little packaged up distillation of what they were talking about with Rey's parents. The fact that like
Right.
anybody can aspire to be a hero. Anybody can have the Force in them.
Which is, one, a very Disney message, and two, is either reinforces the fact that Rey's parents were really nobodies, or maybe further misdirection.
Yeah, it could be. It could go both. But again, that speaks to the overall quality of The Last Jedi in the sense that.
Which is, they blew it wide open. That was awesome. Yes. The other thing, too, though, is that I've kind of criticized Star Wars in the past, and I was really looking forward to Rogue One because Star Wars was always a very Skywalker-centric story. Right? And I always kind of wish they went to other planets and talked about other people and whatnot. But now that they've done this and made this decision, I kind of wish, I take it back. I want Rey to be a Skywalker. I really do.
Really? What makes you say that, though?
Because it would explain why the Skywalkers are so special. Because remember, like in episode 1, The Phantom Menace, Anakin's mother claimed that Anakin was conceived of Immaculate Conception, right?
Yes, and that's totally canon still.
Right. And so it would, based on that alone, because it's like totally like bonkers incident, that would explain why the Skywalkers are destined to bring balance or, have a certain connection with the Force. And that would explain, I think, Rey's connection with the Force and why she's so Force sensitive and why she's so strong. Because there's a part of her, there's a part of her that's Skywalker.
Yeah, but do you know why Anakin was immaculately conceived?
No, but Immaculate Conception must be rare and special.
Because it's not that there's like some sort of like godly presence or some consciousness to the Force that chose the Skywalker clan and kind of said that like, you're the chosen one. The ironic part, and I'm pretty sure this is still canon, is that the reason Shmi Skywalker conceived Anakin, the reason she conceived him immaculately was that was a result of a failed experiment by the Sith.
Well, the Sith are also Force sensitive, just to the dark side.
No, I know, but what they were trying to do, it was an experiment. I can't remember if it was something that Darth Sidious was doing or if it was his master, Darth Plagueis.
Well, it's like the theory of like the story of the like, Darth Plagueis the Wise, yeah.
Yeah, but Darth Plagueis was trying to do an experiment that was connected with the whole like eternal life thing and using the Force. And so he started an experiment and then he thought it was a failure, but it was an experiment to, create life using the Force. And he thought it was a failure, but what they didn't know was that it had actually led to the conception of Anakin Skywalker. So there was an irony there in the sense that they were doing it for nefarious means, but it actually resulted in a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. So which furthers my point that somehow this Skywalker bloodline is special. That would explain to me why Rey is so special. I feel like the fact that, just anybody could be a Jedi Knight, anybody could be a Force sensitive, to me is okay, a very Disney message, but it kind of takes away from how special the Skywalker family is, because the story has...
Maybe. But what about Snoke, though?
Okay, Snoke has been, like, super underdeveloped, which, again, goes against, like, to the Sith thing. Is he actually Sith Lord?
No, I think someone said that he's essentially a being that came from outside of the galaxy that we see in Star Wars, and he achieved his Force sensitivity through other means or not well understood means, and he doesn't identify as a Sith because Sith is like, the evil version of the Force users in that specific galaxy.
So who's the other Sith? There's always two, right?
Well, no, because that was only true of the beings that had the Force in that galaxy. If he came from outside the galaxy, he was never a part of a particular order, as far as we know.
Right. Okay, so that's fine. Like, if Snoke isn't Sith, that's fine. But who's the other Sith along with Kylo Ren? There's always two, right?
No, but if Snoke came from some other place, came into that galaxy, and then recruited Kylo Ren, I mean, there's nothing as not a Sith, and if Kylo's not a Sith, then there's no like rule of two governing them at all. Like there could have been more of them.
Yeah, but Snoke could just be like a Darth Maul, where he's like an apprentice or a pawn of some kind, right?
All I'm saying is that like the usual rules don't apply. So like you could have Snoke, and then Snoke could have like a million different recruits, and he wouldn't feel any need to like follow the old system because he comes from outside the system. And in the same way Kylo could have like he could have his own network of Force sensitive evil people, right?
I don't know. I just figured like whether or not Snoke is Sith or not, who is Kylo Ren's Sith buddy? That's all.
Who's his Sith buddy? Like now that he killed Snoke?
Maybe Snoke was never the Sith buddy, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So, I mean, so who's the other one, I wonder?
Well, there doesn't necessarily have to be because Kylo was never Sith.
Well, I mean, neither was Vader, really, was he? Vader wasn't a Sith Lord.
Yeah, Vader, because Vader took on the Darth honorific or whatever you call it.
Oh, okay. All right. I guess.
Because I think if Kylo identified as a Sith, he would have called himself Darth somebody.
He's the supreme leader. Maybe that's a new term.
Yeah, exactly. There's no system in place to say that there has to be two of them or that one of them is one thing.
I thought that was always a rule.
Well, it was a rule with the Sith.
Right. Okay. Well, are the Sith like completely done?
But if they're not Sith, then there's no rule.
Like there's no Sith anymore, then what's the point of the Jedi?
That's more to the point of the movie overall, is that, like, you know, the Sith are no longer kind of around in the way that they used to be. They could have decided to, you know, between Snoke and Kylo and whoever else comes along who's evil, you know, they could just do a whole new thing and have more evil people with the Force. And so as a result, like, the Jedi mean less now because
I'm immediately less interested in Star Wars without Sith and Jedis.
Well, you're not interested in the kind of like the crazy gray area in between like good and evil and like what that might mean for really ambiguous characters.
Of course. And I feel like the Jedi and Sith are a really good way to illustrate
But
that.
they're very binary though. Like, you know that a Jedi is inherently good and the Sith
They say they are, but their stories are not.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to Snoke. I didn't mind that, like, we didn't learn that much about him. I thought it was really cool. They killed him off. And the throne room fight was, like, the best fight ever.
Oh, yeah. It was great. I remember as Kylo was kind of rotating Luke's lightsaber towards Snoke, and I'm like, are they going to do it?
Yeah, I was thinking, and I was like,
are they going to actually do it? Because that is a really bold move, right?
Yeah.
And
that was awesome.
And even when he kind of ignited it, I'm like, okay, he's going to do it. He ignited it, and then Johnson very kind of cleverly, he waited to kind of pull the camera back and show the full scope of what had happened, and then
he got Darth Mauled.
yeah, and then not only that, but he pulled the lightsaber through Snoke to finish him off. Like, it was nuts.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, when Darth Maul falls through that reactor or whatever, his body like splits in half.
Yeah.
It's really cool. But like I said, I told you, man, Kylo Ren was gonna ask Rey to join him. It's like tradition. I still kind of think they're related.
Yeah, because they all, like, you know, one of the great kind of things about Star Wars is the evil character always wants to kind of defuse the rivalry by bringing their closest enemy or their greatest enemy onto their side, right?
I wouldn't say defuse a rivalry, but more like add power.
Or yeah, well, you know, however you define it, but like the result is the same. Like, he would take her out of the picture as an opponent for the time being.
Yeah, I didn't mind Snoke as a character. I kind of wasn't very interested in him to begin with. I think the more interesting parts about him are his place in like Sith mythology and what role he plays. But, you know, like, I'm kind of glad we get rid of some of these guys like early on. So
yeah, and what a middle finger to the fanboys too, because remember all those crazy articles people were going on and on and on
Rey
about
is Snoke's daughter.
Rey is Snoke's daughter, or Snoke is secretly Jar Jar Binks.
She could still be, but whatever. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Some people took the whole Jar Jar Binks' Snoke thing, like, seriously, and they put a lot of thought into justifying it using the text of the movies and all this. Yeah. And I was like, come on, guys, like, A, wait until you have actual data to go on instead of making a bunch of inferences. But B, we've never been shown anything to kind of make us care that much about Snoke at all.
There's still a part of me that wants to believe that Jar Jar Binks is the evil Sith Lord theory.
But which evil Sith Lord? Because
the evil Sith Lord.
the absolute, like, top dog.
Sure, why not? Whatever can explain away his, like, awful presence, which some people compared to Benicio del Toro's character, which I think was unfair because I didn't mind Benicio del Toro's character, who I think will play a much bigger role in the next episode.
Yeah, I think the way they left off his character suggests that he's going to be back for more. He might even, like, briefly help the Resistance again or something, maybe redeem himself in that way.
He's gotten a habit of developing weird accents for roles in his movies now. Like, between this and The Collector.
Yeah, it wasn't so much an accent in this, it was kind of like a vocal tick, but yeah.
Exactly. Did you enjoy the Porgs?
I was fine with the Porgs. Like, nothing the Porgs did was anywhere close to other annoying Star Wars creatures like Ewoks, for example. Like, and like, obviously, I'm not even somebody who hates Ewoks. Like, I'm fine with the Ewoks in Return of the Jedi, but the Porgs were less intrusive than them, so that as a result, that was fine. And the interactions with Chewie were kind of funny as well.
Chewie did nothing this film.
But I mean, isn't Chewie always like, he's always been tied to Han? So with no Han, it's, I don't know.
So we could just like fuck off.
Maybe, but more like, I don't know, maybe they could have given him something to do. But he does he pilots the Millennium Falcon through that big flight sequence with Rey.
Right. Quick question. What was more cringeworthy for you? Luke drinking the milk or Leia floating through space?
Maybe Leia floating through space. I was fine with Luke doing that thing. I felt like it was it was weird. Like the expression on her.
It was so weird though, especially for a Disney movie. I was like, wow. I was surprised.
But is it finally an answer to where the milk comes from?
Of course, but I'm saying it was pretty graphic.
Graphic in the sense that you see where you see the actual udder of the creature,
and he actually pushes against it and actively milks it. Whatever. It's just nature, whatever. The other kind of small thing I had gripe against the First Order was General Hux, who I felt had become a caricature by this film. All of a sudden he's almost like a comic relief, when I felt in the first film he was actually pretty, a formidable villain, and in this one he just kind of gets handled by Kylo Ren.
I was okay with the direction they went with him here. I found a lot of the scenes that were meant to be funny, I found them really funny, and I like Donald Gleason anyway.
He's good, but I'm just saying the character is just, I can't take him seriously.
Well, I think that's sort of the point, because you remember how in Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi they have those random Imperial officers who they kind of mug at each other when they're running into Vader and stuff. They're like, and you kind of get a bit of a thrill out of watching Vader torture some of them.
I figured he'd be more Grand Moff Tarkin than laughing stock. That's all.
Maybe, who knows? Maybe they'll dust off Grand Moff Tarkin for a future movie. They have the technology.
Yes. How did you feel about Rose's character? That was one of my biggest problems.
I was okay with her again. No major annoyances. I felt like she was a bit of a vehicle to deliver that whole side narrative about inequality in the universe and how the rich, there's obviously this kind of category of character that we haven't seen a lot in Star Wars, but the wealthy profiteers from the never-ending battles, and she kind of exists to deliver that via dialogue. So that was kind of a bit inelegant for me.
The one thing that kind of frustrated me a little was that we know Rey is a strong female character. I think she's a very well-written, well-rounded character. Rose is kind of portrayed to be like that.
Right.
But I also felt like she uses Finn as too much of a crux for her character. If had it not been Finn who convinces her to go on this mission, would it really still have happened?
In the sense that would she not have been that important at all if she hadn't kind of,
or had she not met Finn, would she still have sprung to action?
Probably not. But I think
yeah, so I think that's a mark against her, because she needed this male hero to basically get her going and show her the way.
Except she kind of comes about it in a reverse way, because she jumps into action when she sees that a hero that she had previously respected was being a coward again and trying to get away, and she zaps him and carts him off, and it's only then that they have that little...
Oh yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
What is it that happens when after Finn has been shocked and he what is it that makes them... Oh yeah, she's talking about hyperspace tracking, and then he remarks that he sort of knows how that works because he used to be in the First Order, and then they kind of piece together their idea for breaking into the Dreadnought and turning off the hyperspace tracking. So it sort of evolves from that. But yeah, I think she's a little bit more closely tied to the whole Finn as a coward thing, because then when she dives in the skiff vehicle in the third act to kind of stop him from his suicide mission, it's her kind of telling him it's one thing to be a coward, and it's another thing to overcompensate by sacrificing yourself, but maybe sacrificing yourself is an overcompensation for being a coward.
I guess. I mean, hey, if the guy wants to be a hero and kamikaze himself, I mean, he's trying to save the people he loves, which is basically Rose's life motto.
True, but I think she had kind of like, she was looking at the scenario and she thought maybe that he wasn't even going to be able to blow up the thing anyways, so it would just be like a meaningless death.
I guess. I mean, how rude of her to interrupt.
Yeah.
I didn't like the kiss either. I thought that was really forced and really dumb.
And now it's going to like kick off this whole thing about like the love triangle between Rey and Finn and Rose, and like who's going to come out on top.
No, I don't even know if they're going to go down that path, but the fact that it felt like it was there, like there was almost an implication, because like Rey and Finn had gotten so attached to each other in The Force Awakens.
Right.
But that could just be Rian Johnson being like, you know, I'm just going to kind of ignore what J.J. Abrams did and take it in my own direction.
Right. I mean, I don't think there's any requirement in the next movie to build on that if they don't want to.
No, but I mean, is Finn's character done? Like, he's gone through a full character arc already. Like, I felt his presence quite unnecessary in this movie. Again, maybe because I felt the Kylo Ren storyline was way better and way more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe not to like kind of put him in a box because of the fact that he's black, but he's always been like, people joke about how he's secretly Lando Calrissian's son, and that, you know, with Lando goes from being introduced in Empire Strikes Back as being like a scuzzy guy like Han, and then eventually redeems himself by helping save Luke and the Millennium Falcon at the very end of Empire. So then when we see Lando again in Return of the Jedi, he's basically like he
doesn't have a big role.
No, and he's just kind of understood to be a hero and part of the rebellion at that point, and we don't get much more development from him. So maybe they'll do that with Finn, though. Like, he'll just be kind of like a part of the larger Resistance group.
Right, because Kylo and Rey are definitely going to be the heart of the next movie.
Yeah. And you know, that could actually, that could work out well for the structure of the next movie, because if they've kind of resolved a little bit of Finn's arc, and if they've resolved a bit of Poe's arc, because Poe has learned not that jumping in an X-Wing isn't always the solution.
We haven't talked about Luke that much yet, but there is that part I want to get to first. You know the part where Luke is on that rock in Octu and he's looking at the horizon, there's two suns or two moons, whatever it is. That's a direct callback to him on Tatooine, eh? It's pretty cool.
I liked it. I thought it was a very kind of poetic way to do the death scene.
The Force Ghost, like Force hologram or whatever he does with Kylo Ren. Very interesting choice by Rian Johnson. This really expands on the powers of the Force, but I thought it was very well done, especially because the salt earth had that red dirt underneath. The red and like the cloud just kind of made it more suspenseful, and at one point the red looked like it was blood like spurting out from the fight.
It was also kind of a great moment that sort of called back to Return of the Jedi when Kylo orders all of the ships to open fire on Luke, and he's obscured by the big cloud of red dirt, and then the dirt clears, and he just does a little like brushing off thing to kind of
it brushes the dirt off the shoulder,
just to taunt him, and that reminded me of the sail barge scene in Return of the Jedi. You know, this very self-confident Luke that people really like.
Yes, that was very Luke. That was very, very Luke. We'll definitely see Luke again in episode 9, but probably as a Force ghost, because Rey does the same exact thing Luke does, where she leaves in the middle of her training, basically, to go save her friends, and she's convinced that she can turn the bad guy into a good guy. And that's another parallel to Empire and Luke as well, when he goes to Bespin.
Yeah, it's a little bit different for Rey, though, because she doesn't know that her friends are in like mortal danger when she leaves. She's leaving expressly to turn Kylo, but when Luke leaves, he's trying to save his friends, and he doesn't even know that he's going to about his relationship with Vader at that point. It's almost like a mirror in that way.
He says he has to face Vader at some point because Yoda tells him, like, if you leave now, like, you can save your friends maybe, but you're going to face Vader and you're not ready. The one other thing that I want to get your thoughts on was the editing of this movie. So for the spaceship chase scene, I think we're told at some point, like, there's 18 hours of fuel left.
Yeah.
How long has Rey been on Octu? Because she's been there at least, like, overnight, because the timeline's kind of like, it suffers through that Game of Thrones thing where like the timeline's kind of screwed up, because her story takes off right after The Force Awakens.
Yes,
but the part in space doesn't really take off right after.
No, and I think that's the point that could be pretty easily resolved. Probably like Rian Johnson or maybe or whoever helped him on the screenplay could probably sort that out, because you could just say that Rey's story is continuous from where we leave off with her in Force Awakens, but the point that actually starts the film, the escape from the Rebel base, that could be starting several days after Rey arrives.
Exactly. So I kind of like, it confused me for a little bit. It was a little jarring before I kind of figured out, oh, okay, all right, I kind of know how this works. It was also really funny that when Luke got the lightsaber, he just threw it behind.
Yeah, and he called it a laser
that was
sword.
Genuinely funny. Yeah, I thought that was genuinely funny.
And again, that was another petty thing that the whiny fanboys got annoyed about, because they were like,
they didn't like that.
no, they thought that it was.
I thought the reach out plant joke was worse.
I mean, I was fine with both of them. I wasn't swayed either way, but
It's just the plant thing felt out of character, and the Jedi, him throwing the lightsaber, felt in character.
I actually think you could make an argument in favor of both of them. There was some people who whined that he would never refer to it as a laser sword and blah 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 blah. You know.
Yeah. There are a lot of like little Easter eggs here and there. I think I read about one on the internet where in Rogue One, there's a line that Felicity Jones says where she's like combing through all the data on that Empire planet, and she says something about like
Hyperspace tracking.
Hyperspace tracking.
Yeah, a few people tried to complain about the hyperspace tracking being a stupid thing in The Last Jedi, but they had that moment in Rogue One to back it up. So again, it was just another example of people doing a very surface read of the thing.
Just two more things. What do you think the relationship is between Rey and Kylo Ren, if any? And do you have any predictions for Episode 9? Do you think Rey is a Skywalker?
I wouldn't be annoyed if she was, but I like the idea of her being her own thing. For Kylo, I'm a kind of a similar frame of mind on that, because I would kind of like to see a conclusion where the bad guy isn't redeemed and that he is legitimately bad.
I think that's the way we're going, though. I think Kylo Ren's going to die in the next film. He's going to get killed by Rey.
Yeah, and maybe that's like and if they do it right, that could be a really kind of jarring moment for Rey, because it turns her belief in his goodness on its head and kind of shows that no, not everyone can be saved, kind of thing.
I think at some point in Episode 9, she's going to come to the realization that Kylo Ren's just dark. He's never coming back.
Yeah. I mean, he is still conflicted.
Yeah, he does something really drastic. And although there's a part of me that kind of wants to see the First Order succeed, and like
Really?
It ends with the galaxy being like this entire like totalitarian government, and it's like not the happy ending everyone expects it to be. There's a part of
That's really
part
dark.
of me that kind of feels that way. I think the original plan was to have Han die in the first one, Luke die in the second one, and Leia die in the third one. But now that's kind of like out the window, because I think they came out and said like they're not going to use any sort of footage on Leia, and she's just going to have like some sort of off-screen death, right?
Yeah, or even they may not even have to kill her. Like somebody suggested that they could pick up in Episode 9 several years after the events of The Last Jedi and just sort of say, oh, General Organa is off in such and such a system recruiting new membership, or something to that effect.
If anything, like these past new movies have really shown us that they're making a very conscious decision to balance things, right? Like compared to the original trilogy, from like good to dark and dark to good and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, so we'll see. When's the next one coming out? 2020?
2019.
2019. Such a long wait.
But we've got the Han movie in between.
You think that's going to be any good?
I mean, it could be. I believe in Phil Lord and Chris Miller, especially if they kind of did a whole bunch of work and then Ron Howard came in to sort of clean it up and make it more Lucasfilmy.
Or how do you feel about J.J. Abrams returning to do the ninth?
As long as he doesn't like turn around and retcon some of the stuff that Johnson changed. I don't think he'd do that, though. I think he kind of respects the thrust of the story enough to go where it takes him. And apparently he's already presented his treatment to Bob Iger from Disney, so it's definitely moving along.
It's interesting that George Lucas really has no say in where this universe heads now.
I'm fine with that.
Really?
I don't hate the man. I just
he's
think
a really
that, like,
good world builder. He just can't write a script.
That's the thing, right? And like, he.
But I mean, I like his ideas. And all of this, like Rian Johnson's the only one who got writing credit for The Last Jedi.
Right.
And I wonder if that hurt him or helped him.
Maybe equal bits of both. I mean, there was...
Yeah, because the Casino Planet wasn't very interesting. The Salt Planet was kind of cool. But was that him or was that George Lucas or... or was that part of the Star Wars universe already before, or what?
No, I think that the Salt Planet was definitely a new one, but Abrams worked with like Lawrence Kasdan on the Force Awakens script, and Lawrence Kasdan is like, he's been in the franchise since the beginning,
right.
So he was kind of a good voice to kind of come in and say like, this is how we used to do it before Lucas did everything himself.
Yeah, but I mean, like, he's not a world builder like Lucas.
No, but I think the perfect kind of mix, like if Lucas is going to work with anybody, it's got to be someone who has more of a screenplay writing and more of an actor's kind of mentality rather than the world building. You can't just have that because, the prequels are what happens.
Yeah.
But then, like, Lucas also has a bit of a bad habit, too, with what he does with visuals because he said to Gareth Edwards on the set of Rogue One, he came in and was seeing how, like, Edwards had prepped all of this practical effects and was doing everything with makeup and with prosthetics, and he said, you can do this in a computer.
In exactly that voice, yes.
Yeah, and Edwards was like, oh yeah, I know, George, that's okay, we're gonna do it my way, thanks. And I've really respected Gareth Edwards for that because again, that was like Lucas kind of I think he's one of those few filmmakers, sort of like James Cameron and Peter Jackson, who they've kind of sold themselves on the idea that everything can be fixed with CGI and everything is made better when you have ultimate control over the image. And I don't believe in that. I think that's a bit...
I always like practical over CGI.
Yeah. So Lucas is part of that crowd of guys who kind of thinks that, you can't ever get the perfect thing until you play around with it a million times in the computer.
That's true. I just think that practical effects always look much more realistic no matter how good the technology is.
Do you think Abrams or Johnson will ever go back around and do director's cut special editions with new effects?
No, because Disney won't allow it.
No, probably not. But like, I feel like as directors, they're a little bit more kind of, when they finish a movie, they're like, yep, that's done.
Yeah.
And then they don't feel this need to go back and fix things.
Yeah. And Rian Johnson's getting his own trilogy too, isn't he?
Yeah, so he's going to run off and make something else totally different.
Yeah, so I really like that because I think he really took the Star Wars universe into interesting direction. So I'm glad he's doing his own trilogy because he can really like explore even more and go more in depth. And J.J. Abrams, despite my criticisms about him being very unoriginal, he's a very competent director.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We'll see what happens. I couldn't even guess what the name would be. Maybe something that's close to Return of the Jedi. I don't know. Top 10 movie of the summer for you?
Of the summer?
Or not of the summer. Top 10 movie of the year for you?
For this?
Is it up there?
It's definitely, I don't know. Because I saw a lot of really good stuff this year so far. And
this is just on the borderline. Like, it's really close to not being there. But I might talk myself into it being there at some point in the next couple of weeks. So I'm not sure. I think it is very entertaining, and I do like it a lot more than The Force Awakens, which I thought was okay. Yeah,
and like we haven't even seen all of the really big releases from this year yet. Like maybe in the first episode of 2018, we can like go back through everything we've seen that's like an official 2017 release, and because we haven't seen The Post or Phantom Thread or a few of the really big auteur movies that are set for Christmas releases.
I'm very intrigued by the Phantom Thread. I'm a big Paul Thomas Anderson fan.
Right, and so like you may see that, and then that'll be the thing that bumps The Last Jedi down to number 11 for you or something.
Yeah, maybe. Could be. As far as blockbusters go, like I think we've had a pretty good run so far, other than DC. And I wonder how this movie will play out a year from now. I wonder if audiences will still hate it as bitterly as they did.
Well, I mean, I think those few voices that we've heard from so far, or maybe not a few, but those several thousand, say, who have been really vocal about it, I do think that their criticisms may fade a little bit, and we may get a more complete picture of what the audience really thinks about this in about a year's time.
Sure. Where does this rank among all Star Wars films?
Oh, I want to put it pretty high up there, actually.
Well, it's in the upper half for sure.
Yeah, I would say...
It's not better than Empire.
No.
It's not better than A New Hope. So at best, it's number 3. But is it number 3?
I think I would put it at number 3. I like it more than Return of the Jedi, and I certainly like it more than all the prequels. So, are we counting Rogue One in the mix?
Sure, that's a Star Wars movie. It's better than Rogue One.
Yes.
Rogue One has not aged well.
I still like Rogue One on the whole. I don't like the reanimation of Grand Moff Tarkin or Princess Leia in those, but there are big pieces of Rogue One that I really, really like still. So
me too. It has its flaws.
True. Yeah.
It's definitely better than the 3 prequels. I kind of have a soft spot for Return of the Jedi. I didn't mind the Ewoks. But again, like Jar Jar Binks didn't bother me that much. So maybe my tolerance is a little higher than most people, which is kind of surprising to me because usually my tolerance is lower.
Yeah. I think I would put Last Jedi number 3, Force Awakens number 4, Return of the Jedi 5, Rogue One 6, episodes 3, 2, 1.
3, 2, 1? It's 3, 1, 2. 2 is by far the worst.
I like some of the battle scenes and the lightsaber fights in 2 too much.
There's more in episode 2. But the best lightsaber scene is in episode 3 anyway.
Yes, yeah.
With Obi-Wan and Anakin. I like the pod racing episode 1. I like Darth Maul. Episode 2 had that stupid, awful love story.
It did have the awful love story, but...
and General Grievous was such a disappointment, and it was too much CGI. But anyway, I think I like Empire first, A New Hope, probably Return of the Jedi, honestly. And then The Last Jedi, and then Rogue One and The Force Awakens in some sort of order, flip-flopping between those two. Yeah. And then 3, 1, 2.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So that's a different take there. So yeah, that discussion is like, we've dedicated an entire.
Okay, I'm tired.
we've dedicated an entire bonus-sized episode to that. So I think maybe to close things out, just give a shout out to our listeners because this will be the last episode of 2017, and we want to thank you for listening over the course of this first year of the podcast. And
happy holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays, and we look forward to bringing you more lovely episodes in the year to come.
Yeah, whatever you celebrate, like Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, Christmas, birthdays maybe, whatever you want to celebrate. Thank you for listening. Be sure to check out kinetoscope.ca for Rob's latest review of The Last Jedi, and we'll talk to you guys in the new year. From Vancouver, my name is Jason Chen.
And from Toronto, I'm Robert Snow. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the new year.